All right, you can turn to Proverbs chapter 24. You can go to the Bible app, download that for free. Welcome to our Freaks Online at mochurch.tv. So in 1980, the video game Pac-Man was released in America, and people lost their minds, and something happened that we now call Pac-Man fever, that people started playing it, going to the arcades with just pockets full of quarters, and that was what they wanted to do, to play and experience Pac-Man. And Momentum's friend, who we heard from earlier, Jerry Buckner, and his musical partner, the late Gary Garcia, both from Akron, Ohio, by the way. I don't know if you knew that. They had a song called Pac-Man Fever that created that phrase, or captured that catchphrase, made it very, very popular. But that rocked the airwaves. So about every couple years or so, we do this recurring series that probably every church in the area does, called Pac-Man Fever. And we look at some old school and new school video games, and we just say, okay, let's pretend that video game is a small parable, a story with a spiritual point. What can we learn about God from that? So Punch-Out was a series that first was in the arcades. It was Punch-Out that came out in 1983, then Super Punch-Out in 1984. But then in 1987, the next installment of Punch-Out in the series came to NES. So it wasn't on the arcade. It was in your home, people. You could play it on your television set, as they called it back in the day. And so that came in, and it was the best one yet. Definitely the best one yet, because the final boss was the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, Iron Mike Tyson. You're like, oh man, that's so cool. You get to fight Mike Tyson, and you're not even on a plane, just like a passenger on a plane. A couple of you got that? Like 5 of you got that? Okay. And so, man, that's incredible. So Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, man, it received critical acclaim. How many of you have ever played Mike Tyson's Punch-Out? By round of applause. Okay. How many of you have ever beaten Mike Tyson? Anyone? Real? Wait, so somebody clapping out there for real? Come on. Yeah, there we go. Okay, come on, Keith. Yeah, I've beat him. I know our guitarist has beaten him. But it was epic when you got to Mike Tyson. He was so fast. Those uppercuts were just like bam, bam, just tear you up. And so it was so exciting. And then if you beat him, you got a code that you could go straight to him, which was really, really cool. And so Mike Tyson's Punch-Out is often considered and ranked among one of the greatest video games of all time. So if you liked it, you're not alone. It has just been considered one of these most beloved video games of all time. So in the game, you are Little Mac. And Little Mac, you're fighting your way up through the World Video Boxing Association. And if you've played it, you remember the faces. Here they are. In fact, had Mike, our volunteer, gotten past the first guy, because that didn't have a lot of time. He had 4 minutes. Had he gotten past him, though, you would have seen that the next opponent was... Where's he at? I'm looking for him. I said, oh, there he is, right there. Anybody know his name? His name was Von Kaiser, which is very much like John Kaiser, who sits in our front row. Is such a resemblance. You're way sexier than him. Man, come on. So, yeah, anytime, now when I see him, Von Kaiser, I'm like, John Kaiser. And so, anyways, that's the second fighter after the first guy, which is Glass Joe. The dream fight, though, is when you fight Mike Tyson at the end. And so, in this video game, I mean, it's boxing. So, constantly, you're dealing out punishment, but you're receiving punishment. And when you go down, as we saw Little Mac go down once in that match, you have to mash, or as gamers call it, you have to spam the A and B buttons to get back up. And you saw that happening. Like, you even saw Little Mac's head start to come up, but then he went down. What that means is you got to spam even harder. Like, you got to to get up, you got to keep spamming the A and B button, A and B. And that's how you get up to continue the fight. And if you get knocked down 3 times in one round, that's a TKO. I recently learned, just when I was studying for this, because there was some deep research I had to do, but I recently learned that in any match, not just within a round, in any match, if you get knocked down 3 times, you're only getting up 3 times as Little Mac. If you get knocked down a 4th time, you're not getting up. It doesn't matter if it was 1, and then 2. You're gonzo. You're done if you get knocked down a 4th time in any match in Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. And so the idea is you just have to keep getting up. Like you get knocked down, you just got to keep getting up. And so over and over and over, you're mashing the A and B button, mashing the A and B button, because the opponents get harder and harder and harder. And so you're constantly mashing the A and B button to get up so that you're not down for the 10 count. So turn to Proverbs chapter 24. The book of Proverbs is a genre. It's in literature in general, but also in Scripture, a genre called wisdom literature. And so that means the book of Proverbs is just full of good judgment, good sense, godly understanding. And I was studying the book of Proverbs a few months ago, and a couplet, 2 verses, jumped out at me that I just really never paid much attention to. I'd read them many times, but they really popped out at me, and I started digging into them, and that's what we're going to look at. Proverbs 24, verses 15 and 16. It says this, "Do not lurk like a thief near the house of the righteous. Do not plunder their dwelling place. For though the righteous fall 7 times." Ooh, feel the analogy coming up I-77? You feel that? "Though the righteous fall 7 times, they will rise again. But the wicked stumble when calamity strikes." Now, just so you don't get the stigma attached to the righteous doesn't mean the perfect. Oh, the righteous. No, it doesn't mean the perfect. It just means those who live by faith, those who love God, who try to follow Jesus imperfectly, but covered by God's grace. And so verse 15 is a warning, essentially, to cover the first verse of the 2. It's really just a warning against attacking the righteous. It's basically saying, don't mess with God's people. Like, if you mess with them, eventually you will have God to deal with. So don't mess with God's people. That's verse 15. So this morning I want to pull out just 3 little insights out of verse 16, which is kind of our key verse today, and just pull 3 little insights. And the first is just this. If you look carefully at verse 16, one thing you might notice is that a righteous person can be knocked down. Okay, I want you to see that. Like, that's really important, because a lot of people are like, man, you know what, if I just give my life to Jesus, if I just follow God, then things are going to get better. Oh, no. That's so cute. They might get worse. Okay? Like, there are things that will certainly get worse if you follow Jesus, but then there are some other things that might get better. But a righteous person, someone who loves and tries to follow Jesus, can be knocked down. Verse 16 makes that clear. Though the righteous fall, though they fall, though they suffer a setback, though they go through a difficulty, though they make a mistake, because there's different ways to fall. And so, though those things happen. Now, we've had a string of baptisms recently at Momentum, which has been awesome. I mean, kids, students, adults, just kind of a string of them. And one thing I like to kind of remind people when they get baptized, or tell them for the first time if they haven't heard it, is, man, expect that once you get baptized, which is like the spiritual high, it's like a milestone. It's like, yes, I made this decision to submit fully to Jesus, to die to self, be rise to walk in a new life, the way that Jesus died, was buried, and raised. It's exciting, but expect that just because it's exciting, you will be knocked down soon. Like, expect to be attacked as soon as you're baptized, because you'll have this spiritual high. But Satan's going to come at you as quick as he can, as swiftly as he can, because he wants to discourage you from this new path that you've decided to take. I'm going to follow Jesus. And so I always tell people, man, just be ready. Like, eventually you will be attacked and tempted. You might say, realize, like, man, friends and family are criticizing me or clowning on me because of this decision I just made to be baptized. Or man, new temptations have popped up for me that weren't temptations before. Like, I wasn't tempted by that. Now I gave my life to Jesus, and now I'm tempted by new things? That doesn't make sense. Oh, it makes complete sense. Satan's trying to get you back. He's doing everything he can. And so it might be new opportunities. Notice the air quotes. New opportunities arise that really are distractions, things to pull you away from Jesus, pull you away from Jesus' people who hold you up, pull you away from your Mo group, pull you away from worship. And these new opportunities, you have to perceive, man, I have to choose wisely what opportunities I take and which ones will pull me away from God and worship and his people. So expect that you will fall. The righteous, they can get knocked down. The second thing is this. A righteous person can get up from devastating blows, repeatedly. Okay, someone who follows Jesus, they can repeatedly get up. I remember playing in the arcade, actually. I don't know if it was before Mike Tyson's Punch-Out came out. I remember playing Punch-Out, the generic one without Mike Tyson's name attached to it, because they didn't have the licensing for Mike Tyson at that point. And so I remember playing that, and I remember vividly, you can look it up on YouTube to find the arcade version, and what would happen is when punches were thrown to the stomach, there was this voice that would say, body blow, body blow, body blow, body blow, uppercut, body blow, body blow. And I remember that was stuck in my head as a kid. I actually, as a kid, thought they were saying mighty blow. And so I was like, mighty blow, mighty blow. And then later I was like, oh, this is body blow, body blow. And so, but I remember that. And here's the thing. When you are Little Mac, you're going to take a whole lot of body blows. You're going to take a whole lot of uppercuts. And Little Mac can only get up 3 times in a match. That is his max. He gets 3 times and that's it. But the righteous just keep getting up after body blow, uppercut, maybe even a mighty blow. You might even get up from a mighty blow, okay? I mean, you just keep getting up. So I just got to tell you, peek under the hood, today's sermon is really a glorified pep talk. You know, it really is. It's connected to faith, though, but it's a glorified pep talk just to say the righteous just keep getting up. Because of the faith and the power they have through God and the hope they have through Jesus, they just keep getting up. The righteous, though the righteous fall 7 times, they rise again. A Bible commentator, scholar named David L. Bland, which is a bad name for a guy who writes about the Bible. His last name's Bland. Sorry. I also know a pastor named Nick Boring. I feel so sorry for him. But anyways, commentator Dave L. Bland says, I love this, the righteous are a hardy bunch. They will continually recover from adversity or temptation 7 times, he says, and be even stronger. The righteous just keep getting up, which you know what that means? They just keep getting knocked down. They just keep getting up, though, repeatedly, over and over. The righteous just spam the A and B button, and they say, I got to get up. I can't let this be the thing that keeps me on the mat. I got to get up. I will get up, and I just keep getting up like Little Mac. Anybody remember in the 70s, there were those toys that little kids play with called Weeble Wobbles? Remember those? They were egg-shaped, bottom-heavy, and if you had an airplane, because they had like vehicles, you know, houses and buildings and furniture that Weeble Wobbles, eggs, sat in. And they had faces and, you know, different types of faces. There's girls, there's boys, all the stuff. And so Weeble Wobbles, the commercials in the 70s, which you can also look up on YouTube, every one of them has the tagline in it in some way, in a song or whatever. Weebles wobble, but they don't fall down. That's the righteous, man. Like, boom, they get knocked down. Not really. They're back up. Boom, down, back up. That's the image here, is the righteous just keep getting up. They must have something that others don't have. They must have some faith or hope or strength. They just keep getting knocked down, just keep getting back up. One of the Weeble Wobble commercials I watched last week says you can't keep a good Weeble down. I mean, you just can't. Like, they just keep popping back up, popping back up. Scholar Derek Kidner, he says of this proverb, 24:16, he says this proverb is about the resilience of the righteous. The resilience, the God-given stamina and perseverance of I will just keep getting, the buoyancy, the bounce, they just keep getting up. In the last series that we covered, Good News for All People, I talked about this guy named Paul and his buddy Barnabas, who were missionaries. And one time they went to a city, I covered this about a month ago, they went to the city called Lystra, and it was kind of a small town in the middle of a rural area. So probably a little bit more of a podunk town in that area in Asia Minor at the time, in modern-day Turkey. And I purposely didn't cover this part of the story, because the story finishes and concludes, but there's this little tag on the ending. And this is the tag on the ending, is that there are these people there who were pagan people. They worshiped the Greek gods, and they thought that Paul and Barney were Zeus and Hermes. And so they started trying to make sacrifices to them. And Paul's like, wait, no, we're just people like you. We're not gods. Don't worship us. Like, we're just mere humans, you know? And so they barely could get them to not make sacrifices to them. But listen to what happens next in this little tag on the story. Acts 14, 19 to 20 says, It says, then some Jews came from Antioch and Iconium. So some people came from other cities to this city and won the crowd over. They stoned Paul and dragged him outside the city thinking he was dead. But after the disciples had gathered around Paul, he got up and went back into the city. The next day, he and Barnabas left for Derbe. What? So two things here. One, notice how fickle that crowd was. They were trying to make sacrifices to worship Paul at one moment, and then some other people go like, no, these guys are idiots. The stuff they're teaching is stupid. It's one taco short of a combo meal. And they just start going at Paul, and the crowd that just was trying to worship Paul said, yeah, kill him, see? We got to kill him, see? And so they start stoning Paul, and Paul is dragged out of the city and left for dead. Now, this is what's interesting is the text is really cryptic, really mysterious. Like, you really don't finally know, is Paul dead? And the believers, the disciples gather around him, maybe they pray for him, and he comes back to life? Or is he just beat down and he gets up? You can't really tell. I think it's that he was just beaten down. I don't think that it's a resurrection, but it could be. It's super mystical, super cryptic. What happens, ambiguous in this text. But the point is, Paul just gets the tar beat out of him, and he's laying there. The people that did it think he's dead. He's outside the city wall, which is where Jesus was crucified, outside of the city wall, just for a little metaphor there. And he's laying out there, and the disciples gather around me. Oh, man, this was awful. He looks terrible. And Paul, like a WWE wrestler, like puts a hand in the air during the sleeper move, or whatever. He's like, I'm back, baby. Like, what in the world? And what does he do? He goes back into the city. It's almost like I want to make a statement. I'm not going to leave because I'm afraid of them. We're going to leave in the morning. Like, I'm going back tonight. And the weeble wobbles, he gets back up, he's mashing the A and B button, like, Paul, you can barely walk. I know it hurts so bad. We're going back in that city. And he goes back into the city. Now, here's what's important to me. I just realized this in the last month. I know Paul later on references this stoning that happens in Lystra. He references it a couple times, like, man, what they did to me. They beat me down. I just want you to understand, Paul may have suffered the rest of his life physically from that beatdown. But he got up, and he went back in there, I think, to make a point. We're going to leave in the morning. We're not leaving tonight. We're going to leave in the morning. I'm going to go back there and show them how important this message of Jesus is. And even though they tried to kill me, I'm going back in. But he may have suffered the rest of his life physically from that, but he just kept getting back up. He's like little Max, spamming the A and B button. Though the righteous fall 7 times, they rise again. That's just what happens. When I was in college, I was super, super extroverted and hated being in my room by myself to study, but I knew I had to study. And so I was like, I got to study. So I would turn on ESPN, and I would turn on Discovery Channel, and I'd have that on while I was studying. And for some people, that would be a distraction. For me, it fooled me into, there are people here. There's something going on. I'm not missing out on, there's probably some hot chick named Shannon out there that I should be courting, trying to pick up, and maybe she'll marry me one day. I was just like, okay, I got to focus on studying. And so I would study, Discovery Channel would be on. One thing I learned in college was that when a baby giraffe is born, picture mama giraffe, very tall, and she's standing up when she gives birth. So what's the first thing that happens to baby giraffe when it's born? Falls 10 feet. So moms, that's like giving birth to your child through a basketball hoop. So the baby giraffe, the first thing that happens in life is it plummets 10 feet to the ground and smacks. I mean, a newborn little baby giraffe. And their legs, like super, like they're the size of straws, they're like, so its legs are tucked up under it like this. It's like, whoa, that was abrupt, like, wow. And it's just like looking around, considering the world for the first time. And so the mom comes up and checks kind of like what humans do, like, does he got enough fingers and toes? Old school people used to count fingers and toes when a kid was born. Well, obviously the giraffe has hooves, but it's just laying there looking around like, man, that was really shocking. And the mom looks up, checks it out, makes sure everything looks in order. Man, that looks like a good, healthy young girl. Looks like a good, healthy young boy. And then does the most unthinkable thing. Picks up its long, pendulous leg, picks it up in the air, and just punts that baby like 10 yards down the field. Like, what in the world was that about? Like, man, and this baby goes wrong. I picture like other mothers from the animal kingdom calling child protective services at this point. Like, it's the baby giraffe. She's doing it again. Yep. Send the paddy wagon, like, here we go. And so the baby giraffe just like, whoa. Like, oh, man, the ribs are hurting now. Like, not only did I think I hurt my knee falling, I like, oh, gosh. And so the mom walks up, jogs over, and just again, bam, kicks this baby giraffe, and it goes flying. And it happens over and over and over again. And you picture this baby giraffe being like, Mom, is this necessary? And it just goes on and on and on. But here's the point, is Mama Giraffe knows that eventually they're going to be traveling in a pack, and along is going to come a lion, a hyena, some kind of wild hunting dog, leopards. There are going to be predators that are going to come along. And the ones that are going to end up being Little Debbie snack cakes for those leopards are the ones who don't know how to get up quick. If you're laying around in the sun, chilling, and all of a sudden a leopard shows up, you have to get up and be able to move with the safety of the pack. You have to be able to get up quick and go and move. So the mom is teaching in a loving way, I got to teach you to get up quick. If you don't get up quick, you're dead meat. If you don't spam A and B button and learn to get up from this, oh, there's much bigger things coming than this. Like, this is very small. I am training you to get up quick because bigger things are coming, and you're going to be feeling more like a victim in the future. You're going to be feeling more like, woe is me. Oh, I can't do it. Why does this only happen to me? You're going to be feeling all those things. And man, I think that's why God allows us to go through some of the things. He doesn't like seeing us go through things. But I think God a lot of times is like, man, this does suck, and I'm allowing it. But I hope they make choices to get up quick because something much bigger is coming. And they're going to need the strength from this to deal with that. When that thing comes, and that thing is going to be really heartbreaking. And so if they can get up now, they might have the strength and the muscles build up to just spam the A and B button and get up in the midst of something that's a bigger obstacle, a bigger setback, a bigger temptation, a bigger disappointment, just to get up quick. Get up, little Mac. Like, don't just lay there and feel sorry for yourself. Get up. Use this as an opportunity to build strength. And man, I know some Christian people, a lot of them at Momentum and other places too, who I just feel like in life, more than me sometimes for sure, I'm like, man, they have just taken body blow, and they just keep getting up. And I'm like, and I've asked at times, I've been like, how in the world is your attitude so good about this? Well, because before I was diagnosed with this, I was diagnosed with this smaller thing. And man, I learned to get up from that, and I learned to trust God and understand that God is good and lean on Him. So it sure helped when this diagnosis came along, because I kind of build up that strength to lean on God and His goodness and to do the same things I do to anchor myself, root myself, center myself. And I just learned to get up quick. Man, body blow, but they kept getting up. If you've seen the original Rocky film, there's 22 of them now, but if you've seen the original 1976, Rocky was like trying to prove to himself that he wasn't a bum. But he gets this fight against the champion, Apollo Creed. And Apollo Creed's definitely a better fighter than him. He's more ripped than he is and all that kind of stuff. He's just a cooler character in a lot of ways. And he's fighting him in this fight. But early on, one of the commentators says in that fight, Rocky can't even keep his gloves up to protect himself anymore. And it keeps going on till the 14th round. Do any of you remember when boxing matches went to 14 and 15 rounds? Nowadays, they don't. They're like 1.5 and then we're done. Okay, but back then, it went to 15 rounds. So they're in the 14th round, and Rocky gets knocked down. And famously, his own manager, Mickey, is in the corner shouting to Rocky what? Stay down! Stay down! Because he's getting his butt kicked. He's like, you can end the punishment now. Stay down, Rocky. Down, stay down. He just keeps telling him. And what does Rocky do? Clearly, he hears the soundtrack that we hear. He's like, that is inspiring. I'm getting mashed in the A and B button. He's like, I know that song didn't come till later. But he gets up and he goes back at it and he goes back to fight. But he spams. But here's the deal. Apollo Creed was definitely the better fighter, definitely more skills. He's a champion. He's got the experience, all that stuff. But Rocky's ability, unlimited ability to absorb punches and his dogged refusal to stay down is what makes him who he is. He just keeps getting up, mashing the A and B button, spamming the A and B button. And here's the deal. Whenever you get knocked down, Satan is whispering in your ear, down, down, stay down. I mean, you have been through setbacks that I can't fathom some of you have being through. And every time Satan is quick to slide over to your corner and to say, stay down, stay down. You know what? The rest of the world doesn't struggle with pornography. Stop struggling with it. Stay down when it comes to temptation and sin. This should defeat you. If you don't have your health, you don't have anything. Your health is everything, isn't it? That's what the world tells you. So you're like, oh man, why don't I just give up? Stay down. I mean, so many things happen that Satan is just going to whisper for you to give up and to stop fighting and just, no, don't spam the A and B button. But that's all the more the times you're like, man, I got to get up. I got to show up. I've got to train myself in godliness. I've got to do these things because what else do I have? And man, I wish we had dramatic music to play every time you got out of the car and came back to momentum after you've been through something. Wouldn't that be awesome? Like you go through something because you've been through stuff. You get out of the car and it would be so great if like, man, I know I just made an epic mistake. And a lot of people momentum maybe through social media or whatever know I made an epic mistake. But you pull up, you get out of the car, and you're walking in the door. Wouldn't that be awesome? Like, okay, man, I feel it. I'm mashing the A and B button. I'm getting up right now. I'm making a comeback. After the diagnosis, you still worship online. Or after, the devastating breakup, you still show up to Mo Group and you get out of the car and you walk up to the door of your Mo Group. After disappearing during the entire pandemic, and you're embarrassed. You're like, it's been months since I've shown up there, and I knew it, man. I've just been home, and I just let myself get distracted. Get up, man. Like, mash the A and B button and say, I got to make a comeback. I'm not going to stay down after the death of someone really special, after the miscarriage, after the DUI, to say, I'm going to mash the A and B button, and I'm going to get up. After the really bad haircut. Whatever it is, like your thing, whatever your thing is, man, I'm going to mash it and I'm going to get back up. Because the righteous, man, they get up after, they fall 7 times and they rise again. Last point. A righteous person will be raised even after their final fall. This is really what this is all about. What does it mean to fall 7 times? Well, it isn't like the way we're counting with little Mac, like he can only fall 3 and get up, but that 4th one does him in. 7 times, as some of you Bible scholars know, 7's the number of completion. It means completely fallen. I have fallen completely. It isn't counting 7. It's saying you have been apparently completely defeated. The famous Bible scholar, especially of the book of Proverbs, Bruce Waltke, he says 7 symbolizes completeness, and then he goes on to say this. Check it out. Indeed, the righteous person's situation may appear to end in final ruin, he says, like the boxer knocked out for the count of 10. It may appear that it's over. And Waltke says, in a word, the righteous are regarded as knocked out for good. So what this is saying is, there comes a time where it looks like you are gonzo, you're done, you're down for the 10 count. It is over with. Like throwing the towel, it is absolutely done because of whatever it is that you just went through. But the righteous, even when they look completely defeated, still will ultimately rise in some kind of way. The righteous fall 7 times, they rise again. And what it's hinting at here is the rising, being raised of a resurrection. There's this hint here of after complete defeat, complete fallenness, you are done. There's not even a breath in you. All of a sudden, you are raised by the power of God. And so even after you receive the coup de grace, you are raised by the power of God if you follow Jesus. Coup de grace, that French phrase that basically means the final blow, the death blow. It's, sometimes it's to put a person out of their misery, sometimes to borrow from another video game, Mortal Kombat, finish him, you know. It's like that's the end. This is it. Done. Or it even means an animal is suffering terribly. The kind thing here is to put him down, the coup de grace. Well, coup de grace just means that final, that death blow. And so the good news of Jesus, the story of Jesus, why it's good news and hope for every person is the idea that Jesus received the coup de grace for us on the cross. That he says, I will take the punishment for every way that you've ever fallen, and I will fall on the cross. I will become sin for you. And he takes the coup de grace, the death blow, the coup de grace on the cross for us, but he got up again. And that's the idea, is the righteous fall, and Jesus, the only one who is truly, truly righteous, he rises again after what seems like complete, 7 times, defeat. And so, okay, well, who cares? What does that mean for my life right now? It means a lot because Romans chapter 8, Paul, who got stoned and then got up, bashing the A and B button. Well, Paul, he says in Romans chapter 8, man, the spirit that raised Jesus from the dead, if you follow Jesus, lives in you. You have resurrection power inside of you if the Holy Spirit lives in you. You have that inside of you. And, of course, that means when you die and are down on the mat, finally in this life, for good, again, you rise because Jesus rose and you're following Jesus. And so Paul says it makes a big deal in this life because you have resurrection power living, dwelling inside of you, the Holy Spirit. Daniel Goleman, who is a secular psychologist, he wrote Emotional Intelligence, which was what made that phrase popular. He wrote that back in 2005. And he says this, I think it's super interesting. He says, over the last 30 to 40 years, there's been more individualism and a decrease in religious community and family. So he's saying, because we want to be so individualistic, this is my problem, this is my deal, it's none of your business, I'll find my truth, I'll get through it, blah, blah, blah. He's saying because of that, family is not as powerful as it used to be, and religious community isn't as powerful as it used to be. So otherwise, you're not surrounding yourself as much as other societies in the past have with the kind of resources that you need in people. And he goes on to say this. He says, but when through faith, you get a larger perspective. Think about that. When through faith, you get a larger perspective, and he says, i.e., for example, God and the afterlife, and then you lose your job, or you lose a boyfriend or a girlfriend. He says, then when you have this larger perspective of God and the afterlife, he said, then with the perspective of eternity, it just seems like a temporary defeat. Isn't that so true? This is a secular psychologist who's basically saying, I understand the resource that you have as a person of faith. Like as a person of faith, you don't think this is it. And he, he grew up in a Jewish family and had like a Buddhist guru and all that kind of stuff or whatever. So it's not like he doesn't have some kind of beliefs, but he's like, man, this perspective of eternity makes a big deal how you handle the loss of a job, the loss of a girlfriend, loss of a boyfriend. Why? Well, for the follower of Jesus who's promised the resurrection of Jesus, it's because we look at life and we say, man, I get knocked down, but that's just a temporary defeat. So I'm going to get up 10 toes down and I'm going to get back in this battle and get back in this fight. But the thing that can make me do that is the perspective of eternity. I have the perspective of this life at times can be brutal and crappy, but this life isn't all of my life. And so sure, if this happened, we have someone at Momentum who recently just had an amputation. We have people who've just recently lost a spouse. Like those things, like, man, it is really difficult. It's really hard. But this is just part of my life. And with the perspective of eternity, that just seems like a setback to the righteous. Why? Because we know that even after death, what appears to be complete defeat, even after what appears to be the 10 count, we will be raised. One last story. I was reading the first church history that's ever been written. It's amazing. It's by this guy named Eusebius. He started writing it in 300 AD, finished somewhere, I'd say, around 325 AD. But he writes about this violent local persecution and mob violence that broke out in Gaul, which is modern-day France, but it was part of the Roman Empire back then, in the city of Lyons and Vienne in 177 AD. This is legit. So he has sources from Christians who were there, And here he's about a century or so later, and he has these sources, and he's talking about it. He says, man, what they would ask people was simply this: are you a Christian? And if they said yes, they would be tortured, and they would try to get them to deny Christ, to say that they weren't a Christian anymore, and eventually they would be martyred. And if you kind of you stood through that and you didn't die, they would call you, it was like this great privilege in the church, you were what they called a confessor. Like, I confessed or professed or declared Jesus in the midst of punishment and death. And so they would say, so-and-so, the confessor. And that was this huge compliment. Like, you stared death in the eyes, but you had perspective that even if they kill you, that won't knock you down for good. And so this is what he says, quoting from an earlier source. Eusebius writes this: the full fury of the mob, the governor and the soldiers, fell on Sanctus and on Marturus and Attalus and on Blandina. Anybody notice the femininity of that name? Blandina. And it says, through whom Christ proved that what men think lowly, God deems worthy of great glory. Christian perspective versus society. He said, when we were all afraid, Blandina was filled with such power that those who tortured her from morning to night grew exhausted and admitted that they were beaten because they had nothing left to do to her. They were astonished that she was still alive, since her whole body was smashed and lacerated, and they claimed that any one of the tortures was enough to end the life, let alone a succession of them augmented. But the blessed woman, like a noble athlete, gained in strength while confessing faith and found comfort for her sufferings by saying, I am a Christian. She just kept mashing the buttons and getting up. And they didn't know what to do with her. They didn't know what to do next. And so the documentation continues, and he goes on sidetracks and talks about Sanctus, one of the men, and another one of the men, and eventually how they were martyred. But he keeps also coming back to Blandina. And he says, Maturus, Sanctus, Blandina, and Attalus were taken to the beasts. This is kind of the next part, at a special public exhibition in the amphitheater. And so here's the ruins of this amphitheater. It's now been developed around it in France, but that's the ruins of the amphitheater. Here's a wooden post you might notice. Obviously not the same wooden post, but in the foundation, this is the same wooden post that Christians were put on while they were tortured and, attacked by beasts and all that stuff, and people watched and cheered for their deaths. And it said Blandina was hung on a stake and offered as food to wild beasts that were let loose. She appeared to be hanging in the shape of a cross, and her constant prayers greatly inspired her fellow victims. So she's praying out loud, and the people who are being tortured or chased by beasts are hearing her praying out loud. And it says, they greatly inspired her fellow victims, that all who suffer for Christ have eternal fellowship with the living God. When none of the animals would touch her, she was taken down from the post and returned to jail. Small, weak, and despised, she had put on the great invincible champion, Christ. She just keeps getting up. And finally it says that when she comes back to this amphitheater, this time with her is a boy, a 15-year-old boy, it specifically says, named Ponticus. And her and Ponticus go out in front of the crowds, and Ponticus kind of leans on her strength, and she is encouraging and motherly to this boy who follows Jesus named Ponticus, and he stands beside her, metaphorically speaking, through all of his torture, and is kind of inspired by her strength until he is eventually martyred. And then Blandina, after being tortured some more, was wrapped up in a net and thrown to a bowl that tossed her around like a rag doll until she finally died. And when I read that, I was like, Blandina is one of my heroes of the faith, man. Like, that is unbelievable. I'd never heard of her or whatever. And here it is in the pages of church history. Blandina celebrated because she just kept getting up and prayed prayers that reminded the people around her, this is not the end. If you are knocked down for good right here, this isn't it. Like, we will be raised no matter how much we get knocked down, and even if our defeat seems complete. She just kept getting up. Near the end of his life, the Apostle Paul, after being knocked down over and over, clinging to his hope in Jesus, though, he wrote this. He said, "The time for my departure is near. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I've kept the faith. Now there is in store for me the crown of righteousness, the reward, eternal life, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day. But not only to me, but to all those who have longed for his appearing. It's a pep talk. Get up, little Mac. Mash the buttons. No matter what it is you've done to fail, no matter what it is, the setback in front of you, if you are in Christ, you have resurrection power inside of you to get